My name is Janine. My dad is Palestinian and my mum is Lebanese. And I grew up moving around a lot, predominantly in the Middle East and predominantly in the Arab-speaking world. And so with that being said, I'd just like to say that the Middle East and the Arab-speaking world is such a broad group of countries and a broad group of people and diverse group of people. And so I can only really speak to my own experiences. But with that being said, I would say that the roles and responsibilities of men and women really differ depending on a few different factors. The first is whether you live in a city or whether you live in a regional area. So people who live in regional areas, women tend to have more of those traditional homemaker roles, whereas in the cities, you're more likely to see women working and filling some of those traditional male-dominated roles. Another factor that impacts gender roles for men and women is socioeconomic status. So people that tend to be from lower socioeconomic status tend to have more of those traditional beliefs around gender norms and gender roles compared to people from higher socioeconomic status. And another factor is age. So I would say the younger generation is more likely, when women are more likely to be in work and to fill some of those traditional male roles, whereas in the older generation, there tends to be more of those conservative views around gender roles and gender norms. Having said that, something I will say is that in more recent times, there has been a growth of conservative political groups. And what that has meant is that there's been an increase of people who follow those groups and therefore kind of adopt those quite conservative views and beliefs, including around gender. And on the other side of that, there's also a really growing women's rights movement across the region. And that has also meant that people are becoming more progressive and more pro women's rights and kind of starting to question some of those traditional gender roles and norms. And so people are kind of being pulled in different directions across the region. There's also a really high proportion of refugees in the area. So from, I would say, about the 40s, we had Palestinian refugees, and then we had Iraqi refugees, and now more recently, Syrian refugees. And refugees can either live in regional areas, and if they live in regional areas, they're more likely to live in refugee camps or in urban areas. And refugees really have a lack of access to, a lot of things, including healthcare, including education, including employment opportunities. And refugee women are disproportionately impacted by that. So refugee women are less likely to have access to neonatal care and sexual health services and things like that compared to non-refugee women. And also, less likely to be working and have access to education also compared to non-refugee women. So citizenship status and refugee status is also another factor that impacts women's autonomy, women's rights, and access to social mobility in the region.